All right, it's glowing red, so seems good. Seems good. So I'm gonna be, and can people in the back hear me? Yeah, it's a pretty small room. All right, sweet. So this is one step at a time. It's, oh, sorry, one sec. I'll do this recording too, just as a backup. This is like a space shuttle launch. All right, so this is one step at a time. Lessons learned from Drupal Newbie to core committer. If that's not what you're looking for, feel free to leave. And yeah, just in general, feel free to leave. I won't be offended. It's like end of the day. If you get hungry or something, you feel snacky, that's fine. So yeah, let me see if this can advance. So the slides, like I said, they basically just have big words on them, but if you want them and you don't want to have to like take a bunch of pictures or whatnot, you can go to bit.ly/one-step-badcamp, and I'll try and post these on the session node on the Badcamp site as well. But yeah, so bit.ly/one-step, one is spelled out. So who am I? My name is Scott Reeves, known as Cottser on the internet, on Drupal.org and Twitter and various places. Why Cottser? Basically, it's my brother's fault. I don't really know how he came up with it. My best guess is that it's you take Scott, you put the S on the end, so it's Cots, and then you have Cottser, and so yeah. So it's basically.
So it sounds like rabbit Latin, not quite pig Latin. It's rabbit.
Rabbit Latin? Okay.
Yeah,
is this an older or a younger brother?
Older. Yes, older brother. So yeah, it's good stuff. So other than that, I am one of the Drupal 8 theme system co-maintainers, working with Twig and pre-process and all that kind of stuff. I also maintain the stable base theme in Drupal 8 that is there for backwards compatibility, and mostly maintaining that theme is just telling people not to change things, so it's been pretty easy so far. More recently, I'm one of the core committers for Drupal 8, so that means that I can. It's hard to explain in a really brief way for this slide, but I'll talk more about it later. But basically, I can push the button that makes code go into Drupal 8. So yeah, and I focus on theming, front end. So I'm kind of like the front end representative in a way. So for people that are trying to get their changes into Drupal 8, front end wise, theming wise, most of those kind of go through me now. And by day, I'm also a team lead at Digital Echidna. We are a 50-person Drupal shop out of London, Canada, and my boss is here, first Badcamp, so it's good stuff.
Hell yeah!
Hell yeah! So what I'm going to be talking about is kind of my journey, my contribution journey of the past 5 years. Some of the things that I think I've learned. It's meant to apply to much more than just Drupal. So if you have like a side project you want to start, or a new hobby or whatever, like I don't know your life, but if there's something that maybe you're passionate about but are not sure how to find the time, this is kind of me like stumbling and bumbling and finding a way to try and fit things into my life. And yeah, so without any further ado, this is kind of the first takeaway, if you will. So the takeaways are all going to be in kind of this like green italic to tell, so you can kind of like tell them away from the plot. The plot is going to be like in white, so just so you know. So the first one is a kind of a two-parter. So nobody knows everything. I certainly don't have all the answers, and I don't want to give you the impression that I do know all the answers, because I definitely don't. I'm just trying to share. But together we know a lot. So this one I definitely give credit to Kathy Faze, also known as YesCT. This is kind of one of the lessons that I learned from her, is that it's okay if you don't know something. So I worked with Kathy in the Drupal core mentoring program for quite a while, and if you're trying to help people like at a Drupal sprint, and like, okay, here's how you test a patch or something. It's okay if you don't know how to do a thing, because you could probably look it up with the person, you can ask other mentors, like you just kind of collectively, you can probably figure it out. And if not, you can probably still even ask someone else or something. So, I'll talk more about core mentoring a little bit later if you're wondering about that, but for now, let's rewind. I'll give you a little bit more of my background and kind of try and keep things chronological. So we're going to go back to Y2K, the year 2000, the year 2000. So this was the year that I put my first website on the internet. And it was a Quake 1 fan site. It's a video game. And looking back, I must have picked a really good free host because it's still online. I'm not going to give you the URL, but maybe at the party later if you're really curious or something. This message up here, I'm going to read it in a second, but this message was on that first website and still is because the site is still online. So, few things to talk about here. I'll just read it out first. So, it says, looks best with a Cascading Style Sheet capable browser, which is either Internet Explorer 3.0 plus or Netscape Navigator Communicator 4.0 plus. So a couple main things. Number one, there were browsers that couldn't do CSS. That was the thing. Hell yeah! I don't know if that means that guy hates CSS, but anyway. That's so perfect. And yeah, I lost my train of thought. So awesome. Okay. Now, so the other thing is that, Internet Explorer 3.0, we didn't even know that there was going to be an IE6 to cry about in the year 2000. It just boggles my mind because I'm sure some of you have fought long battles with IE6 over just ridiculous things. So, but this does also bring me to kind of the fast-changing nature of the web, and that's one of the things that I love about the web and I love about this industry is that it doesn't stand still. There's always new stuff to learn, and then, if something is annoying, it'll probably go away, such as IE3 or IE6. They'll slowly die off. Other than that, I've been doing stuff on the web for a while, and this is, not to say that I'm like an amazing expert, like this was just like a little hobby site of a teenager, but you gotta start somewhere. I went to college for graphic design and kind of ended up getting sucked back into the web, I guess you could say. So let's fast forward kind of a bunch of years from that. In roughly the 2 years or so before I started using Drupal, I was using a PHP framework called Cake PHP, and it's kind of loosely styled on Ruby on Rails, and but all in PHP. So I was building kind of web applications using this, and did some very light open source contribution to Cake PHP in terms of like typo fixes. I just checked today, and like on GitHub you could search, because they're on GitHub. On GitHub you can search like your commits basically, or you can search someone's commits on a project, and it's like typo fix, typo fix, typo fix, and then at the very bottom, the first one that got committed was actually like a functional change, but I wasn't afraid to start small. So I did a lot of also documentation updates. Like at the time they had a wiki that was basically here's all our documentation, and it wasn't like Drupal where you can edit it directly. They kind of had an approval process, so you would suggest a change and then someone would sign off it. It's like someone who's kind of in charge. And I guess I did that enough that at least for a while I was in the top X, I don't know if it was like top 10 or something of documentation editors, because I just went in and like fixed stuff. When I was working on my projects, I'd find little problems with the documentation or maybe things that could be improved. And to kind of close the loop on Cake PHP, I also worked on a local, besides kind of doing client work, like when I was freelancing, by the way, I worked on a local open data project that was built on Cake PHP, and it was about maybe 10 to 12 people working on that project, and I I ended up I was the only person that knew Cake PHP. Somehow they thought that it was a good idea. I was like, oh, I've used this Cake PHP thing. And they're like, oh, let's use that. And I was like, okay. So I ended up kind of having to like mentor people basically on how to do certain things within that framework because they weren't familiar with it. So that kind of, like looking back on it, that's maybe a bit of foreshadowing to kind of Drupal mentoring, perhaps. So if we get into when I was actually starting to work with Drupal, I basically started working on Drupal 7 like very early. Basically like Drupal 7.0 is when I started using Drupal. And the first site that I worked on was like just like a teeny tiny one-page site. It was basically one that my employer had donated to a little local organization, and it's long gone. I don't even have like a screenshot of it, but anyway, it's just like a little kind of one-page site where you could click and it would scroll to different sections kind of thing. It was the style at the time, and maybe still is to a certain extent. So here's a tweet from April of 2011. So this is like maybe 2 months or something, or if that, into using Drupal. You know, early experiences of using anything aren't necessarily going to be great, but it's just kind of funny to like look back at stuff like this and be like, oh yeah, Drupal. So, and this is, so I said Drupal and me, specifically the web form module, are definitely not friends today, but I didn't really know this at the time, but really what I was ranting about was the form API in Drupal. So there you have it. There's other things that I found frustrating, especially coming from that framework mindset. The theming experience, for one, dealing with like PHP templates and these theme functions where if you want to change some like logic or markup of the theme function, you take the whole theme function and you copy that into your theme and you change it. Like, I was just like, what is this? It was really weird for me, and even just the concept of kind of having to override everything versus building up from scratch was different to me as well. So moving on from that, most of my early, I did work on some patches for contrib, and most of them actually did revolve around web forms, so maybe some good came out of that ranting, and I was like, oh, like, we can make this better. But realistically, web form itself got like a few typo fixes, because that's what I do, at least when I'm getting comfortable with something. And but there's a Drupal 6 module out there called web form reports that we were using on a client site, and so it was definitely solving our need, but it had some bugs, so I filed probably like 10 issues, and most of them had patches on there. And contrib can be really great, but you know, if the maintainer kind of goes away, then you know, you may still have 8 issues open against a Drupal 6 module in 2016. So, but it's cool. Like, I'm fine with it. It's Drupal 6. So moving forward a bit into early 2012, this core mentoring thing, Drupal core mentoring, somehow I heard about it. I don't remember why, or I don't remember how. It was called Core Office Hours at the time, so Office Hours might give you a little bit more of an idea of what it's about. Core mentoring, at least one part of it happens on IRC. There's another part of it that happens in real life, like for example at the contribution sprints at DrupalCons. But yeah, what I got involved in that time was IRC. So, like, how many people have been on IRC or know about IRC? A few people, a good amount of people. So yeah, it's just really briefly, like it's an old chat protocol basically. So there's different IRC servers you connect to, and then each server kind of has like rooms almost and private messaging. And so core mentoring happens in the hash Drupal on the Freenode network, and Freenode is just kind of where all the open sourcey stuff happens. And so you kind of go in this time slot, it's a 2-hour time slot, and you say, hey, like, I want to be mentored, and they'll kind of ask you more about your skill set and try and match you up with an issue that you can accomplish and solve, and kind of start your contribution journey potentially. Or you can just be like, not for me. That's totally cool too. So I went to Core Office Hours. I started going, and I went every Monday Depending on daylight saving time, it was either 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. or midnight to 2 a.m. in my time zone. So it's not the best at least for my schedule. But I was enjoying it. I was learning. I did that fairly consistently for a few months, and took some naps sometimes. Time for a nap for Drupal core office hours in February 2012. So kind of after this time, I actually asked my employer if I could attend. There was a time slot that was actually during the day, like around lunchtime in my time zone on Wednesdays. And luckily they said yes. And so I started going in the daytime. And so I would be at work, but I would just, kind of say, everyone, I'm doing Drupal, like, don't bug me. And yeah, so. And I'm just going to take a second here to give a special shout out to my mentor, XJM, Jess. She really helped me. She was kind of like my original mentor, and she helped me so much in kind of getting into Drupal core itself. Even though I'd been doing contrib, I think core and contrib are kind of different beasts in a lot of ways. So I probably wouldn't be up here if it wasn't for her. So thank you, Jess. And that kind of brings me to another takeaway is try and find some support if you can. Whatever you're trying to do, if you can connect with like-minded folks about what you're doing, I think it can really be a big help in whatever it is you're trying to pursue. Whether that's, a message board online or something like that, or even better, a local group, and I'll talk more about that later. If you're not just kind of alone in a room, like trying to write the next best American novel or something, I think it can really be helpful. So use proper name case for core modules. Might seem kind of like a weird thing to put on a slide, but this was kind of one of the first core patches that I worked on. And perhaps it was me trying to get below the level of typo fixes into just changing the case of characters. Like I was trying to really outdo myself on the minimum, the MVP of contribution. So I was just trying to learn basically, and this seemed like a great fit. Someone had to kind of write patches and stuff for this, so I learned a lot about kind of how the community works. I kind of got to know some people a little bit in the issue queues, just working on this one issue, and learned about the different processes, like kind of making a decision on a direction to go into, putting a patch up for a proposed solution, having that patch reviewed, iterating on the patch. Eventually, hopefully, your thing makes it into core. So I got to learn that just through changing the update manager module to be like the update manager. Basically we went to title case. So yeah. So that just, I've been kind of drilling this in already, but start small. Don't be afraid to get an easy win. You can still have bigger goals, but if you can just kind of make bigger and bigger loops, you can really accomplish a lot. I think it was actually in the last Dries note from Dublin. Dries showed this video of a gentleman. He had a bunch of dominoes set up. So he starts with this little domino that's this big, and he ends with this one that's probably this tall. And he shows that they can each knock over one that's twice their size or something. So that could kind of work here too. So try and find that video, or maybe I'll tweet it or something. It's pretty sweet. Inspirational, #inspiration. So whatever your version of fixing typos is, don't be afraid to start there. For me, I just kept on going to core mentoring and just kind of slowly working on bigger and bigger things, and things that were maybe a little bit more functional, like touching code rather than just documentation. And eventually, I guess I was annoying enough that they just asked me to be a core mentor and help other people learn. So I did that, and I mentored on IRC and at sprints at DrupalCons and stuff for a couple. So in IRC for a couple hours, pretty much every week for 2 years. So that was, I put in a lot of hours doing that and learned a lot through that process. And I'll talk more about the in-person mentoring in a minute, but this is just kind of like a little bonus thing because I think this is not necessarily applicable to a hobby, but this is applicable to working on computers with other people, is the 10-second rule. This is another Kathy the SCT one. So basically the way it works is if you are, let's say you're working with someone on a Drupal core, or you're just working with someone on a site, let's say. So you want to tell them, like, you know, go into your command line and like basically go into your Drupal site in your command line so you could start to run commands, like let's say drush commands or something from your site. So kind of the first part of this is like, don't spell out exactly what to do. Like you could be like, okay, now cd space tilde, you know, whatever, or you can just say go into your Drupal site. And the 10-second rule is give them 10 seconds to do it in the way that they want to do it, or give them 10 seconds to either ask you if they're not sure, or just kind of sit there silently. And then after 10 seconds, you can release that tension and say, okay, you know, cd space tilde, whatever. So I find it's really helpful because I use this at work all the time too, because I'm into like doing things efficiently and, you know, saving keystrokes and all that kind of stuff. But if I'm trying to show someone something, like I don't want to really like say like, oh, you don't know about this keyboard shortcut. Like that's not really the point usually. Like maybe at a certain point you can kind of throw in some of those things now and again, but to me it distracts from the goal of, you know, we're trying to accomplish this thing. It doesn't matter how we do it, as long as we do it. So 10-second rule, it's good stuff. So real world mentoring stuff. I went to a sprint in Madison, Wisconsin in summer 2012. This was my first Drupal sprint, first sprint as a mentor, so needless to say, I learned a lot that day because I was like, I don't know how any of this works. I know how to do this in IRC, but that's it. So that was a lot of fun, and it's kind of funny to look back at that, and it was a kind of a neat event too, because it was somewhat earlier in the D8 cycle, but like a lot of kind of big names were there, and I was like just kind of like, oh, like I'm just kind of like starting, and I was like, oh, it's like Dave Reed and Dries is here, and I don't know, it's just funny to look back at some of these things, and especially after you get to know people in the Drupal community, that, you know, people are people, like, you know, there's no like celebrities, it's just they're people. So one of the biggest things that I learned about during Drupal mentoring, both in person and in IRC, was that practice, like with many things, it's kind of a cliche, but practice is so key to learning things and improving yourself and everything. And for Drupal core in particular, the actual process of you as a contributor trying to work on patches or get something into Drupal core, that process of you know, the issue queues and everything can be a big barrier for a lot of people. And once they get to know that, then it's kind of, you know, the training wheels are off and you just kind of go. So that's kind of where I was in January 2013. I kind of felt like I knew the process, I knew the steps that I had to do, but I wanted kind of something bigger to sink my teeth into. I was just kind of working on like little random core issues that I was finding, but that was about it. So I wanted something just bigger. I wanted to kind of give back, because at this time I was like over my early rants about web form. Like I was into Drupal. So in Drupal 8, like earlier on, there were formal Drupal 8 initiatives. Twig was not one of them. Twig was like one of the underdogs, and at least retrospectively, kind of the most prominent underdog, but definitely at the time it was just kind of like sitting off in this weird space, and like, you know, people had heard of it, but that was about it. And based on kind of some of my early experiences with Drupal 7 that I was talking about earlier, like that theming experience was something that I was passionate about and something that I thought could really be improved. So Twig was something that I was just kind of like loosely keeping my eye on, and I was trying to find a fit somewhere in the Drupal community to help out, I guess. And so find or make a fit. This one may not apply as much to like a solo kind of hobby, but maybe it can. Maybe you can find a way to make this fit that. But speaking like in Drupal terms at least, maybe, you know, maybe you have like a module idea or something, or you're going to start an initiative because Drupal 8 is really exciting and has like a 6-month release cycle where we get new features. So maybe you have even just an idea for a new feature, and it doesn't mean you have to do it all yourself, but you could propose an idea, and that in itself is a decent sized project to take on. So I was kind of searching for this, and this is one thing that kind of made it apparent to me that this is something I wanted to help with. So this is a comment on kind of the main Twig conversion issue at the time, from Angie Byron, also known as webchick. That's probably how you know her. And so she said, there needs to be some pickup here real soon, or we might need to have some very hard discussions come mid-February. Sad face. So this is just part of her comment. But anyway, this really resonated with me because I really wanted Twig to be in core, and I was like, well, if one of the core committers is concerned that it's not going to make it, then clearly there's some kind of a gap here, or maybe I don't know something. But a few days later, Carl Wiedemann, also known as C4RL, he created a ton of issues to basically convert all of the things to Twig. So it was like, aggregator module, convert to Twig, and like whatever, poll module, I'm just going to name all the obscure modules, convert to Twig. And I immediately followed all these issues. I don't know why, something clicked, no pun intended, and I just dove in and started to kind of at least keep tabs on these, but soon enough I wanted to actually work on something. And converting things to Twig, I was like, oh, this is easy, just convert A to B. How hard can that be? We're not even changing the markup. But when I started working on it, I found that there were some technical blockers to even prevent us from doing it if it were that simple. So I was a little bit intimidated, but I said, sure, I'm going to try and work on these. And I did get stuck, and I was able to go on IRC because I already knew about IRC from core mentoring, and talk to kind of the Twig team and figure out, okay, what do we need to do to unblock this? And they were very kind and welcoming, and I wasn't sure about that even. I was like, okay, the Drupal core mentoring people are really friendly, but I don't know, maybe the rest of Drupal people are just really hateful and mean people. I don't know. So I didn't actually think that, but you never know. So find your mission, but more importantly, find your passion. For me, Twig soon became a big passion of mine, and I felt like I really enjoyed the work that I was doing in kind of helping move this thing forward that I thought should be a part of Drupal. But pretty soon I was putting in enough hours to call Drupal Twig my second full-time job. So, needless to say, it kind of displaced things in my life, and it was kind of a dark time. We go into the dark time. It didn't take too long for this to feel unsustainable. It was kind of a weird time because it's actually, this last one's kind of good because it's dark with little bright spots, right? That's kind of how it was. It's not like I wasn't depressed or anything, but I just wasn't taking care of myself. Wasn't eating properly, wasn't exercising, wasn't sleeping enough. I was eating microwave burritos and stuff. I wasn't kind of doing my usual stuff because I felt like I just didn't have time. Twig was had to get done, and still have a day job and all that kind of stuff. So try not to do that if you're going to write that novel or whatever, or put whatever template engine into Drupal. Try and stay sustainable. Like I said, it was kind of a very mixed time for me, but I knew that I was lucky to at least know that I was overworking myself, and I wasn't denying that. I guess I was kind of seeing it as more of a long-term sprint to be okay, once this is done, then I can have a life again, kind of thing. And I think that type of pattern kind of shows my privilege as being, a single white person who, I don't really have a lot of responsibilities. I have a cat, no big deal. So that's arguably a flaw of most open source communities, is that the people that can spend the most time, like just sheer person hours, for better or for worse, can have the most impact on the community, the code, all that kind of stuff. So this kind of idea of just like throwing yourself at a thing, I'm not sure is the best way to go. But anyway, that's kind of what I did for a while. But I did find some ways to make more room in my life for things like for this Drupal Twig thing that I was really passionate about. So I started cutting out some things, like I used to check Twitter every day, a couple times a day or something, and I was a Twitter completionist, so I would read every tweet of everyone that I was following, and like I was selective about who I was following, but you know, that's still a fair amount of time, like let's say a couple hours a day or something, to just like catch up on Twitter. And like I pretty much stopped watching TV and stuff like that. And I'm totally okay with those decisions. Like looking back, I'm like, whatever, like Twitter was still there, like I can catch up on TV shows, you know, it's fine. But I didn't feel as peachy about, you know, some of the other sacrifices in terms of like health and social life and that kind of stuff. So you just be selective in what you cut out. But I do think that if you're taking on something big, you probably need to make room for it, because there's only so many hours in a day. And but at the end of the day, remember to have some fun and do whatever your equivalent of taking pictures of your cat is. And yeah, fun is good. So in about like spring of 2013, I organized the first Drupal core sprint in London, in my city, for Drupal Sprint Weekend. And the Drupal Sprint Weekend is a thing where people have sprints all over the world, and it's happened. Well, we've had one in London every year since 2013. The most recent one, we tried to port the menu position module to Drupal 8, and it was hard. We didn't even really get anything working. So like working on contrib at a sprint is totally different from working on core. And so it gave me a big appreciation for people, especially if you're working on porting code, where it's just like, take this thing that like, it works in this version of Drupal, but like, yeah. So anyway, we've also held other sprints outside of Drupal Sprint Weekend, and for me this was kind of part of like getting involved locally. I also helped organize the local like Drupal meetup in my city, and for me this was a good way to kind of stay connected with people and realize that, you know, even though I'm working on Drupal core, which can often be like theoretical and kind of very just theoretical, hypothetical, you know, people out there are using Drupal and these changes will impact them. So it's kind of, for me, it was really good to kind of have that connection in my life. And it's a little bit hard to say it, but I'll say it anyway, is if there's nothing happening locally with whatever, whether it's Drupal or whatever you want to kind of explore, you may need to start something. You may need to kind of try and start a meetup, because chances are you're not the only one. I mean, unless you live in a town of like 7 people, which I heard about that last night, that there is, I think it was in Idaho or something, there's a town where you drive by and it says population 7. Pretty sweet. Maybe I'll go there someday. But yeah, if there's nothing happening, maybe you can be the person to make that happen. And maybe you'll get some people to help you out. So at a certain point, I was working on Drupal Twig, and a few of us on the Twig team were asked to be theme system maintainers for Drupal 8. And so this means that you're in maintainers.txt, you kind of have certain roles and responsibilities. And yeah, so I just remember like being at home, like working on Twig, and I found this out and I was like, okay, great, thanks. And I just kind of like kept going, kind of for better or for worse, I guess, but it was kind of positive reinforcement for me anyway, that, you know, people were seeing, and at least people that were in the core community were kind of seeing like, oh, these people are like doing a lot of work, so maybe we should like actually make them kind of official, even though we were an unofficial initiative. So I've been talking about some of my mistakes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. This doesn't necessarily mean make mistakes on purpose, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's good to learn stuff that way. I don't know. One of the mistakes we made as the Twig team, for example, was that we tried to convert everything all at once. Because of course, like we just wanted to twig all the things, obviously. Problem with that is that in Drupal 7 there's over 60 templates and over 150 theme functions, so it's not a small task to do that. And we kind of had a deadline too of like all these Twig conversions, like converting PHP template stuff to Twig, like has to be in by DrupalCon Portland, otherwise, sorry, no Twig in Drupal 8, better luck next time. So we were kind of like, oh crap, like what can we do to get Twig into Drupal 8, because we had all been working really hard on it. So someone within the Twig team had the brilliant idea of saying, let's convert only these 60 templates, only in quotes, rather than both the templates and all 150 theme functions. And the core committers were like, okay, that could work. You know, you still have kind of crappy PHP theme functions, but at least all of the templates are one template language, being Twig. So it was still a big task to do those 60, and there's all kinds of unforeseen things that came up, but you know, it cut down the task a lot. So that kind of brings me to Portland. So Portland was definitely a whirlwind of activity. We were kind of hustling to get Twig into core. And one of the coolest things about Portland, and most notable things in my opinion, is that we managed to, well, it wasn't really all of us, I'll get to that in a second, but we trained a small army of front-end developers on doing back-end PHP performance testing, which is like, okay, like front-end developers, like they'll do stuff in like in the web inspector and whatever else, so like do front-end performance, totally, but this is like intense back-end stuff. So basically every template we converted from PHP template to Twig needed this performance testing because reasons. So we're like, all right, we'll figure it out. So this is where I take a moment to appreciate that front-end developers, especially front-end developers in Drupal, do not have an easy job. So much respect. Give yourself a round of applause, actually, and we'll just yeah. Front-end world just changes so quickly. I was at the front-end summit yesterday, and it's just, yeah, it's dizzying. But we were still able to get these folks who are already kind of breaking their backs under the weight of Drupal theming to help with this, like I said, like really back-end performance testing and like shell scripts and like blah blah blah. And I know front-end has moved a lot more in that direction of like Sass and build tools, but not everyone was up to that level at that time, and not everyone has to be. And yeah, just legitimately, Twig wouldn't be in core if it wasn't for front-end developers stepping up to do things that were outside of their comfort zone in the service of getting stuff done. So here's a tweet from Portland. Me and Fabian Franz are officially the last ones in the Coder Lounge at 3 a.m. trying to make Twig a reality. Hashtag Drupal Twig, hashtag DrupalCon. Oh, hashtags. So we definitely worked hard in Portland. I know I did. I got a really bad Drupal flu, which is not necessarily a flu, but you know, I got sick. There's a lot of people. Hopefully no one's getting sick at bad camp. But as you may know, we did manage to get Twig into Drupal 8. So yeah, it was a rough DrupalCon for me, but also probably still one of my favorites because hey, we got Twig into core. I remember I was taking this like cold medication that I had bought at like a Walgreens or something because, and I couldn't get kind of the normal stuff that I usually get in Canada because reasons. And what I realized after is that it made me feel really crappy, actually. Like this cold medication that was supposed to be like, oh, decongestant, blah blah blah, made me feel like dizzy and weird, and I was like, got a twig, like just like popping these pills, not literally, but like, you know, taking it on the normal schedule. But I was like, why do I feel weird? And I was like, whatever, Twig. So I wasn't like really listening to my body and like paying attention to what was going on. I was just like pedal to the metal kind of thing. Another little anecdote from Portland is that I did my first like Drupal core mentoring officially stuff. Well, DrupalCon, I guess. Yeah, DrupalCon sprint in Portland, and The mentors at the DrupalCon sprints, they wear like different color t-shirt, like a green shirt or a yellow shirt, so you can kind of tell, okay, these are the mentor people. And I went really late to get my t-shirt, and they only had like a size extra large or something. So I literally wore it as a cape. So yeah, it was pretty odd, but I was basically like, the big like Friday sprint day, it was like the best day ever, because like on the one hand, like Alex Pod is like committing all our patches and like everything is happening, but like I feel like garbage and I'm like running around in this cape, and it was just like, it was a very odd but very memorable day. So whatever you're doing, express your angle, put your own twist on it. And I don't really mean wear a cape. For me, it's been things like how I review patches is different from how other people review patches. Like I have a pretty keen eye for detail, and people call me like eagle eye or hawkeye, and it's not necessarily the greatest quality, but I guess someone's got to do it. And the other thing that I do is I like to automate things. I have for years, so it's usually more like kind of saving keystrokes and like UI clicky automation stuff. So in the thick of Drupal Twig, I would do things like I would bulk create like 20 issues by just, clicking a button and just going away and making some tea or something, and then coming back and I have my issues. And so those are mine. But whatever you're doing, don't be afraid to put your own spin on it. It's your passion, so make it yours. And after Portland, we of course kept on working on theme function conversions. We managed to get all 150 plus theme functions gone for D8's release. Last one bit the dust at Badcamp last year. Badcamp is amazing and has a long history of really cool front-end stuff happening here. And Badcamp is awesome. After Twig, before, after, during, we also worked on some other things like making theme suggestions a bit easier to work with. Still not perfect, but we kind of just tried to evolve things a little bit at that point, because we couldn't just like rip out the whole theming engine, or the theme system rather. We kind of just tried to make things a little bit better. So deadlines can be motivating. We had kind of betas and RCs and kind of stuff like that. On the other hand though, moving deadlines, or kind of like perceptively moving deadlines, can be demotivating in my opinion, or in my experience. So especially if you're going to set a deadline for yourself, be realistic with it, meet it, otherwise, or just like or something. Otherwise you're just going to be sad, and it's not going to, I don't think that's going to help you pursue your passion. And don't be afraid to take breaks, especially once you're kind of past the initial learning of whatever you're doing or getting into habits. You don't have to necessarily do it every day, especially when things get overwhelming. Take a break. I've definitely taken breaks over the years. And earlier this year, I became a provisional core committer. Like I said, theming and front-end stuff. I'm now a full core committer, so I can push even more buttons. I don't know. We also kind of figured out what is a provisional core committer, so that was fun. And it's a lot of kind of reviewing patches, triaging, helping to make decisions. It's been a really fun experience so far, and I've enjoyed it. And I did a really long live commit in New Orleans, but it was very well received because people appreciated kind of how thorough I was with like, okay, I'm looking at this. It was like a 3-line CSS patch or something, but it took me probably like 45 minutes or something to be like, okay, this is, when I'm thinking about this, like I can look at this documentation. And one of the core committers had a good idea to actually have 2 live commits potentially, like the long version and the short version. And the short version would just be like, drumroll please, and like push the button. And the other one would be maybe more for the new people who aren't as familiar with the process and what goes into reviewing a patch. And in terms of like kind of being a core committer, I definitely struggle with juggling all this stuff. Like like I said, I try and make room in my life, but it doesn't always work out. And I have other duties in core, like I mentioned, and a life and a day job and all that kind of stuff. So just try and do your best, stay focused. For me, that included things like I stepped down from core mentoring at a certain point when Twig was really getting intense. I was like, I'm enjoying this more than that, so I'm just going to focus on Twig, and I'm really glad I made that decision. So yeah, keep at what you're doing, be aware of distractions, like don't be afraid to keep moving. Like if you find something new that's interesting, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that's necessarily like capricious to be like, oh, okay, you know, I'm gonna go find this other thing and be passionate about that. Like, that's cool. Remember to be a human. Like, you don't have to necessarily do what people expect of you, because I think, especially in open source, people expect a lot out of open source contributors, and they'll kind of just like take as much as they can get. So just try and kind of be aware of that in whatever you're doing. Thanks for your time.
So, quick question from your perspective.